Hey everyone, my name is Cullen Smith. Welcome to Lifting the Veil. This is going to be a difficult presentation for me to put together, so I'm going to utilize what I've already pre-recorded from previous presentations because my YouTube channel was literally just terminated, and literally all of my social media platforms and every platform that I've spent years, almost a decade, building up for all of this content that you're about to witness throughout this entire presentation has been banned and deleted and just totally censored by all of big tech. So I'm currently scrambling to try to make an alternative YouTube channel and re-upload literally all of my entire 10 years of archives of videos and content. So I've been scrambling doing that. So I've struggled to put together this presentation, so I'm going to utilize pre-recorded segments from various presentations to go into this presentation. So we will cover a lot of material, and we're going to cover a lot of ground here, and I apologize because I'm not able to go as in-depth as it really needs to be, but we will do that in future presentations. So if you want to, I asked for if you want to share or support this work that you're going to see throughout this presentation, you can do so at subscribestar.com/liftingtheveil. I'm moving all of my archives away from Patreon to Subscribestar because of the deletion of my YouTube channel and the suspension of my Patreon account, and on and on and on. I'm getting deplatformed from every single social media and big tech company platform because of the context and the content that you're going to see throughout this presentation. So without further ado, enjoy, and let's dive right into the material. We will cover a cursory introduction, and then we will go deeply into highly advanced content at a really rapid pace. So the title of this talk is Esoteric Anatomy, the Electric Temple of Man, and we're going to cover a lot of material, a lot of different material, and I've had a hard time putting this presentation together because of all the work that I've been immersed in trying to finish up these couple films that I've got going that are almost about to be complete, that I was working on right when I was making this. So I've had to basically completely divert my attention away from that and try to refocus it onto putting this together. So it's going to be a lot of information, and it's going to be a big tapestry that we're going to be weaving together here. The human body is the temple, or the vehicle in which the spirit dwells and operates, and like any high-performance vehicle, it requires proper fuel, proper maintenance, and proper understanding in order to function at its full potential without breaking down. You will learn the basics and advanced metaphysical concepts that govern life, the incredible human body, and facilitate its function as the bridge or conscious interface between the cosmos and the earth. You will learn basic and advanced concepts of language, anatomy, nutrition, hermetic principles, and laws that govern the universe from macro to micro scale. Logia is the study of. I have hewn a sacred log from the logos at the root of the sacred tree of knowledge, and we are going on a log ride of logic. We are embarking on a quest, an initiation through the sacred portal into a rapid overview of the universal mysteries. We will cover the 7 liberal arts, the 7 hermetic principles, doctrine of signatures, epigenetics, and as always, lots and lots of scientific symbology. This is the essence of the Sacred 101, of the gateway of initiation into the portal of the sacred mysteries, to embark on the journey, on the hero's quest. To embark on this quest, we will need foundational tools in order to help decode and decipher the reality and understand the world and ourselves at large. These are the 2 inner truths. These are the inner truth and the outer truth, what I call the twin pillars of knowledge. Gnosis means knowledge in ancient Greek, and it refers specifically to knowledge of self through the internal subjective experience. Scientia is Latin for knowledge, from the root of sciere, of sciri, meaning to know, more specifically referring to knowledge of the external world by means of experimentation and dissection of the parts in order to study the whole. These are the two pillars of knowledge of self, inner and the outer. One must know thyself in order to understand our relationship and role in the cosmos in relation to one another. One can subsequently also come to know thyself by knowing the other. The biblical usage of knowledge of knowing the other meant intimacy, as in sexual union, as in to get to know you better. This is the knowledge of the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge. This is the fundamental knowledge of nature and its reproductive life cycle that is capable of inflicting either great harm or potentially revitalizing and invigorating, enriching the human experience. The keys of knowledge include the 7 liberal arts, which is composed of the 3 roads and the 4 roads, the trivium and the quadrivium. Symbolism is the language of the mysteries, the means by ever which man shall come to know things yet to be understood and intrinsic to his being. Symbolism is a fractal and multi-dimensional form of communication, condensing and distilling vital knowledge of physics and principles of nature into simple memes, which means that which can be memorized or passed on. And that is the very essence of the ancient Hebrew meaning of Kabbalah, which literally means a circle of select individuals, and it also means the knowledge or the wisdom of the elders passed down traditionally, generationally over time. So it's essentially the sacred torch, the sacred flame of Freemasonry, the sacred flame of knowledge, the Olympic torch that is being lit and carried throughout the ages, through the underworld, from the golden ages through the dark night, the long night, and back into the golden ages once again. It's the keeping of the sacred flame of knowledge. Symbolism is capable of conveying far more informationally dense subject matter than most other forms of conveyance, and is therefore fractal in its capacity. Fractality means self-similarity, and is a key component of this presentation. The universe is fractal or holographic in the sense of the ancient Greek root word holos, is its origin of holographic, meaning whole. The same root word of health and the same root word of holy, because to be holy is to be healthy, and to be healthy is to be made whole. By syncretism and integration, assimilation and appropriation, it means that every part within the whole contains the whole within it, hence a hologram. The arts faculty was considered the lowest of the higher was considered the lowest, but was required of all students before entering into the higher faculties. The trivium, or the 3 roads, includes grammar, rhetoric, and logic, and this conveys the ability to be able to convey meaning and communicate the sacred mysteries to those around us and to the world at large, to take the internal and the external world and cross that boundary or the barrier between the two. Whereas the quadrivium, based on Pythagorean division of mathematics, includes arithmetic, which is the measure of number, geometry, which is the measure of number in space, and music, which is the measure of number in time. Astronomy or cosmology is the whole picture, the big symphony, the measure of number in space and time. It's the complete synthesis of all of these elements of the fundamental foundations of nature. These 7 liberal arts also correspond hermetically to the 7 Hermetic Principles, as originally written by the 3 initiates in the Kabbalion. And these principles compose of the principle of mentality, which states that all is mind and the universe is mental. One of the main components that we will focus on throughout this presentation are what follows from this point on, particularly the law of correspondence, and most of these other laws are actually essentially also contained as basically one ultimate principle. So they are different aspects of essentially sort of the same thing. Correspondence represents as above, so below. Or in other words, a mirror reality. That which is above on the macro level is also equivalent to the same level of physics as that which is below on the microcosmic scale, or the smaller fragment of reality. The laws of vibration state that nothing rests, everything is in motion, everything vibrates. And this is because everything is essentially a resonation of sound. Everything that is physical matter is literally arises from sound is an effect of vibration. When things move, things vibrate, and when things move and vibrate, that creates sound as a byproduct. The laws of polarity state that everything is essentially has its polar opposite, which equates essentially as well to the principle of gender, which is, as Walter Russell suggests, is that all of nature is divided into twin opposing sex pairs of opposites, which act like pistons of the universe, interchanging and seeking balance and rest within its polar opposite, where that balance and rest lies, where in the stillness, the center point of the fulcrum between those oscillations of motion or movement, that still point of the fulcrum is the unification that ties it all together and is the engine of all creation. And so this is the two dualistic polarities of nature, which composes the laws of rhythm, which states that everything is in ebb and flow. Everything breathes an in-breath and out-breath in nature. Everything is animated through this motion and this alternating change between polarities, which creates motion and movement in the universe. The law of cause and effect is also one of the main components that we will be focusing on. One of the main components of reality is that everything, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction of Newton's second law of thermodynamics, and that everything that happens has an effect. Everything that we do, everything that we say, everything that we think has an effect, and every effect has a cause. And to understand the intrinsic relationship between that is to better understand ourselves and to better navigate for an optimal lifestyle. Pythagoras had said that, "Man, know thyself, then thou shalt know the universe and God." Protagoras of Abdera had said, "Man is the measure of all things." An ancient Egyptian proverb has said that the kingdom of heaven lies within you, and whosoever shall know themselves shall find it, which then transferred to the later ancient Greeks, which also says which says temet nosce, meaning to know thyself, which was a Greek aphorism hanging above the temple of Delphi, suggested to have been uttered by the Oracle of Delphi. And we find this in the Bible as well, written as, "Neither shall they say, lo here, lo there, for behold, the kingdom of heaven lies within you." Pythagoras had also said, and one of the main one of the main most strict rules of the tenets of the Pythagoreans was, "Let no man enter into the temple who is ignorant of geometry." And this is sort of interesting because if no man is ignorant, if someone is ignorant of geometry, they obviously aren't going to be able to learn about geometry by not being allowed into the temple. So that is why the de-occulting of knowledge and information is so important, so crucial at this time, because we now have to initiate each other into the sacred mysteries, because if you cannot gain knowledge of geometry unless you are first initiated into the knowledge of geometry. So it's sort of a double-edged sword there. So the point is to liberate information that men will no longer be ignorant of geometry. So that's what we're going to give you a vast and a broad overarching scope of throughout this presentation. So let no man enter who is ignorant of geometry. So we will give you the rundown of geometry so that no man will remain ignorant of geometry.
No, they're ignorant.
Rumi had said, "I looked in temples, churches, and mosques, but I found the divine within my own heart." And this is so brilliantly correspondent to what I call the Indwelling Spirit, which is literally the ancient Hebrew depictions of God, essentially, is located within the temple. The human body is the temple in which the spirit dwells, which houses the sacred spirit. And the ancient Hebrew letter Shin was representative of the element of fire, essentially the coals which stoke the sacred fire, the coals which stoke the sacred flame. And the letter Shin in the tetragrammaton of the Hebrew four-letter name of God, Yod He Vav He, as constructed into the human body, corresponds with the four sacred elements, or the five sacred elements, and the fifth element being spirit. You have earth, air, fire, water, and spirit, which essentially spirit is also literally means fire. Spirit is spiritus. It literally means breath. And that breath literally comes from the meaning of fire, as spire literally means to breathe. And it refers to the breathing or the combustion of oxygen, which is a process which keeps fire, which oxygenates fire, which fuels the sacred fire, which is the fuel that burns that candle, that wick of the sacred flame within the human temple. And the Hebrew letter Shin actually corresponds exactly, as I've discovered, corresponds exactly with the nerve fibers of the human heart chamber, of the two chambers of the human heart, the left and right ventricles. And again, the sacred fire, the sacred spirit burns within the heart. So we can't dwell on these segments too long. We've got to keep moving because there's a lot to cover. So we've got to keep moving. The human body is the temple which houses the sacred spirit. And this temple is not to be found outside of ourselves, but the kingdom is to be found within ourselves. The divine spirit, the creative animus that gives forth all life and brings forth all life, is to be found within the source of consciousness within us. The temple was not built with hammer nor stone, for the kingdom lies within you. You will not find him in kings' palaces or churches and mosques built of stone, for the temple of your head is the temple. The temp is a place of worship, as well as meaning temporary, as meaning tempo, meaning a measure of time, a measure of things to pass, things yet to come. And El is the ancient Hebrew name for God, the God of the Old Testament, and the God of the Phoenicians. The temple was the place of worship for God, which is found within you, which was actually the esoteric meaning, the true meaning of Solomon's temple, which was never an actual place. It's a concept it's an allegory which is used to convey multiple layers of deep hidden meanings. In religion, it was the exoteric interpretation was as being a literal temple, but that temple was literally designed in the outlay of the human body, which is what Masonic artwork and Masonic architecture has been doing the world over for thousands of years, if not longer. As the human body is the living temple, the temple of the living spirit. And in Freemasonry, it was known as the Twin Pillars, corresponding to the Holy of Holies, which was the most sacred chamber, the Most High, where the Ark of the Covenant was kept. And we've covered this fully in my Symbols of Power Part 2 and Part 3 films, and we don't nearly have enough time to even go into depth here, but you can see those full films if you want to explore these topics in extreme levels of mind-blowing original detail that you won't find and haven't seen anywhere else. So check that out if you're interested in seeing those on my YouTube channel. And so that is the esoteric meaning of this Temple of Solomon. The Temple of Solomon represents the soul of man. In other words, the soul of Mon. Sol means the sun, and Mon means the moon. Sol is Latin for sun. Mon is, I believe, ancient. Mon comes from the root of manas, min, to think, which means to have in mind, which also correlates to the etymological meaning of spirit, which also correlates to the etymological meaning of the moon, as the manas, the monas, the mona is the name of the moon. So we're talking about the divine principles of polarity yet again. We're talking about the hieros gamos, the merging and the union, the sacred communion of polarities to produce the electric spark of the covenant with God between man and the divine. And this spark of the covenant takes place by the union of polarities, the union of opposites within ourselves, the union and the reconciliation of differing aspects within ourselves, to become whole, to become holy, to become holos, to become healthy. The body is the temple of woman, as well as the temple of man. And this comes from the temple of man concept was deciphered by the genius esoteric Egyptologist R.A. Schwaller de Lubitsch, who decoded the temple of Luxor to reveal the patterns of entering into the temple to be deciphered as enabling higher states of consciousness as a correspondent or an external act of sympathetic magic in order to invoke the divine within, but through the symbolic or sacred act or the ritual act of entering into or coming inside the sacred temple to commune with that inner divinity. So again, it's the temple of sacred communion, of the essence of the very sacred, most sacred aspect of coming inside in order to experience the connection, the communion with the divine. And the ancient Gnostics knew this in every ways, yet again, as the hieros gamos, the sacred sexual union, which was ultimately the underpinning aspect that underlies all of Freemasonry and all esoteric traditions. Ultimately, the entire universe all goes back to the sexual procreation, the sexual dynamics of nature itself, because that is what all physics revolves around. That's literally the principle that creates everything that we see, experience in this reality and in every reality available, is all created through this motion of sex interchange of sex polarities. And so we find these examples that I've compiled here is, again, the Temple of Man by Schwaller de Lubitsch, which was his deciphering of the Temple of Luxor in Egypt. We've got numerous ancient Hindu temples constructed to the divine proportions of the human anatomy as well, complete with the phallic obelisks or the phallic world pillar, the Axis Mundi, always seen penetrating the feminine womb or penetrating the feminine uterus, again creating the sacred union. The body is the temple of woman. The woman is the mother goddess, is the sacred church, whereas the divine masculine, the temple of man, is the rock-hard foundation. The Peter, the Pater, the Patronus, the father upon which the church is built. And this is why you have the dome of the rock built upon why Peter built his church upon the rock. Why Jesus built his church upon the rock of Peter, and why Peter was the rock, because Peter is the rock-hard pater. It is the rock-hard phallic pillar upon which the church, the feminine rotunda, is built. So now you understand why the sacred dome sits on the rock. The feminine sacred dome sits upon the phallic rock. And the very meaning of church comes from the Old English word Circe. Circe was the ancient Greek goddess of magic, sometimes a nymph or a witch or enchantress or a sorceress. By most accounts, Circe was the daughter of Helios, and she was attributed as the goddess of magic associated with a lunar goddess, representative again of the divine feminine. So it's the essence of the goddess, and Circe was also the goddess the goddess of magic who enchanted and bewitched men and turned men into swine, which is symbolic of what the modern church, Catholic Church, does today, which is simply a commercial experience rather than an ancient sacred communion by entering into the sacred temple and experiencing the divine revelatory transformation as we used to in ancient times. So the feminine circle is the Cirque of El. Circe is the ancient goddess of the circle. The circle represents the goddess whole. The goddess whole, it's the sacred whole, which again, we have the whole as well as the whole, meaning the entirety. So this pun, this play on words, is actually deeply etymologically linked. And this is the sacred whole, which is the sacred hollow, which is hallowed, because it's the hollow, holy whole. And hallowed be thy name, which all of these, and I'm going to give a brief rundown of my perspectives on what I mean when I'm talking about the essence of what I'm talking about when I refer to God. And I'm not referring to anything that any religion would have you refer to God as. I am referring to the principles and the physics of nature itself when I refer anytime to God. So this sacred circle is the sacred feminine whole. It's the void of creation, the great gap, which was known in all ancient cultures and all ancient religions as the primordial void from which sprung forth all of creation, essentially the wellspring. It is the feminine well, the dark hole, which springs forth and generates forth and gives birth to all of form, all of matter, and all of creation. And so I want to cover a brief segment of that.
That's the gap, now fall into the gap. Whatever your shape, sex, or size, we got your favorite Levi's jeans. That's the gap now.
So this is extremely, the reason I included this in my full Symbols of Power Part 3 presentation is because the gap, it's highly symbolic that this is a commercial from the 70s, and it's so hilarious that they're, the whole slogan and the motto is fall into the gap, which is the sacred feminine, and that's why the gap is selling jeans, because the jeans are what covers the sacred gap. It's the sacred gap between the legs, the sacred portal of the 101. Between the twin pillars lies the sacred portal, the sacred gateway, the sacred gap of all creation, the Old Norse Janunga gap, the cosmic void, the cosmic womb. And so this is why they zoomed in on the guy's penis in this actual legitimate commercial. Like, they zoom in on it and they're like, woo! Yeah! like it's so symbolically obvious here, and people probably had no idea. The great abyss, the black abyss of space and the deep oceans, the matrix, which means womb, the mother, mater, being the woman where all of life comes from, the source of life. Greek metra means uterus or womb, and meter, mater, matter, meaning mother, where pater, father, is the energetic pattern that gives rise to so-called matter, and thus geo, the word-forming element meaning earth. The earth, coming from Greek Gaia, gives us geometry, geometry, earth measure, literally measure of the mother, but more accurately the proverbial mapping of the womb of our mother, which we inhabit. We are all individual organisms, cells who work together within the body of the earth, forming organizations that we call a body of peoples. Within this matrix womb that is our Mother Earth. Language reflects the roots and the path of our fractal pattern of nature in our universe. How that which we call God, most refer to as a man, just shows us that we are cells that make up a larger organism called Earth, which is itself just a living cell that makes up a larger organism called a galaxy, which is also a feminine word which comes from geo, galactose, meaning milk, which is why we have the Milky Way galaxy. Source or origin, from mater, genitive matrice, meaning mother. Chaos, gaping void. Abyss, that which gapes wide open, is vast and empty. From Proto-Indo-European root gu, to gape or yawn. From Greek kaino, I yawned, meaning of utter. All right, so we'll skip through that. Again, the body is the sacred goddess is the church, the temple of womb man, the birth of creation. Just as this is why the church, to come inside the goddess church, you must enter into the rotunda, the feminine rotunda, which is the round womb, the pregnant belly, and you enter in through the doorway or through the sacred gateway and the vestibule of God into the inner temple inside the Holy of Holies, which corresponds in anatomy to the vulva, the bulb of the vestibule, and the hymen of the Virgin, which is the vaginal canal, and finally into the womb, the most sacred Holy of Holies, where the incubation of the spirit or the fire inside. We sing hymns, or which are praises to God, which comes from ancient Greek hymeneos, meaning wedding song, from Hymen, meaning who was the Greek god of marriage. And yet again, this is the cosmic theme of the sacred Hieros Gamos, the holy sperma communion as it was known to the ancient spermo-Gnostics, upon which all religions and all theologies are founded, upon this sacred sexual principle of the Unitarian polarities of physics and nature itself. And this is the sacred Hieros Gamos, the union of opposites, the union of polarities, the sacred marriage, which gives birth and gives forth generation to not just the human body, but to all of creation. Your body is my church. My body is your temple, and we come to know God through each other. The divine, so what is the blueprint of creation? The divine proportion is the symmetry and harmony, which is healthy, balanced, and flows, which gives way to beauty. The golden ratio is nature's formula for stepping down in energy or electrical energy into smaller fractal units, thus bridging the gap between the worlds of order and chaos, so it is essentially the cosmic ladder, the Jacob's ladder, the cosmic pillar, which around which all things are formed. The organizing principle of nature, which gives rise to function and form in nature. Some of the greatest mathematicians and mathematical minds from all ages, from Pythagoras and Euclid in ancient Greek through the medieval Italian mathematician Leonardo of Pisa, some of the greatest mathematicians and minds of all times have spent countless hours over this simple ratio and its properties. But the fascination with the golden ratio is not confined just to mathematicians, biologists, artists, musicians, historians, architects, psychologists, and even mystics. All have pondered and debated the basis of its ubiquity and appeal. In fact, it's probably fair to say that the golden ratio has inspired thinkers of all disciplines like no other number in the history of mathematics. Euclid's Elements provided the first known written definition of what is now called the golden ratio. A straight line is said to have been cut in extreme and mean ratio, when as the whole line is to the greater segment, so it is greater to the lesser. So in other words, the golden ratio is literally the formula of correspondence, because it steps things down to smaller and smaller scales, infinitely large and infinitely small. So it is the formula by which things are created fractally. And it's not the only fractal form, but it's the main fractal form in this physical universe that we know of and that we experience. Mathematics is the language of beauty and harmony. It conveys health, wholeness, and genetic integrity. The purpose of language is used as a surrogate or proxy placeholder of the real world and all of its experiences in order to carry these experiences around with us anywhere you go, to display the contents of your mind at any given time, to show people what's in your mind and that which you're speaking to. The goal of this language is to make that which you're communicating with as closely represent the image of what it actually is in reality. Or in your mind, such as the more descriptive you can make something, the greater the definition it has, or in other words, the greater the clarity of the picture. In other words, the higher the resolution that your display becomes. Thus, the greater resolve, or the resolution, or conviction you have upon your mind and your perception of reality. So language arises from the collective mind of the physical world in order to describe the experiences we have both physically and psychically. Language arises directly from mathematics itself, the universal language, expressed through DNA, which communicates physical form through the process of morphogenesis, which means the birth or the creation of form. So, for example, the rock ptarmigan and other species don't have to think about communicating their genetic health with mates. The health of the DNA does that for them because their plumage displays a perfect fractal spiral hypertrochoid pattern depending on how healthy their gene expression is. So the healthier the genes are, the more perfect the spiral mathematics of their feathers are. This is same with how we perceive physical beauty in the world. Studies have shown that the healthier the DNA in ptarmigans, the more perfectly the feathers display the Fibonacci sequence. We experience this through peacock feathers as well, which directly displays this vortex hypertrochoid mathematics. Fractal geometry in biology communicates strong genes, healthy expression, as well as beauty, vitality, fecundity, virility, etc. So does this pattern also translate to all species, including humans? And, well, So the evidence suggests that this pattern also translates through all species, through all organisms, essentially, at some point, to some extent or another, and especially is found in the human genetics as well. The golden ratio is in the eye of the beholder. The golden ratio is how we intrinsically measure beauty, which is why it's communication through everything we know, everything we perceive, the physical golden mean symmetry as being physically attractive, because what derives that physical golden mean symmetry is ultimately the health or the gene expression, which receives greater cosmic information from the electromagnetic stimuli or environmental and lifestyle signaling pathways around us that communicate physical health and mental traits to our genetic well-being. A temple for the human body is found in Phi and the Pentagon. Dr. Stephen Marquardt has studied human beauty for years in his practice of oral and maxillofacial surgery. Dr. Marquardt performed cross-cultural surveys on beauty and found that all groups had the same perceptions of facial beauty. He also analyzed the human face from ancient times to the modern day. Through his research, he discovered that beauty is not only related to Phi, but can be defined for both genders and for all races, cultures, and eras throughout history, with the beauty mask that he developed and patented. This mask uses the pentagon and the decagon as its foundation, which embody Phi in all of their dimensions. This is from my presentation and ebook, The Quintessentia, the Perfect Fifth Element, the Goddess and Pentavalency of Nature. And this is the meaning of quintessential, again, is the fifth element. The fifth element is the element of spirit, which again is the element of fire, essentially in a higher aspect, a spiritual fire, and invisible fire, and inextinguishable, and what Tolkien had called the flame imperishable, and we find throughout Hollywood culture and mythology as the eternal flame. So the quintessence literally means the fifth essence, from Latin quintus, from Latin quintessentia, meaning the fifth element, the most pure, the most distilled, and the most pure form of the elements. The Greek translation was the ether, which was added by Aristotle to the four known elements, water, earth, fire, air, and said to permeate all things. Its extraction was one of the chief goals of alchemy, the philosopher's stone, in the sense of the purest essence of a situation or a character, etc., which is the meaning of quintessence, the most important aspect, the highest, the most purest, most distilled aspect of the elements. So this element of the pentagram, or the pentagon, this pentavalency of nature, is the essence of the sacred goddess, and the essence of sacred geometry, and the essence especially of fruit and the plants in nature, influenced by the astronomical cycles of the planet Venus, which represents the pentagon. Within the apple there is contained the five-pointed star and the seated vulva, which symbolize the two aspects which are required for creation in the material realm. Fire is the number which represents the spiritual and unseen aspect of life and creation. Within the five is the number which represents the spiritual and unseen aspects of life and creation. Within the number 5 is contained the four elements of fire, air, earth, water, air. Fire, earth, air, and water, along with the quintessential fifth element, which is referred to by the alchemists as ether, the Chinese as ki, as ki or chi, and the Indian mystics as prana, and to the ancient Egyptians known as ka, the element of spirit, the animating life force. And of course, ki is also the 22nd letter of the ancient Greek alphabet, pronounced as ki, and it literally means to mark with an X. The symbol of the apple, the pomegranate, and the fig, and even the Amanita muscaria mushroom are all representative of the juicy, fruiting, reproductive sex organs of the sacred tree of knowledge and the tree of life, and are actually even symbolic of the female genitalia in most cases, which is why these were the allegorical forbidden fruits of the tree of knowledge of both good and evil, depending on how it's used, referring to the sexual intimacy of knowledge, of knowing each other intimately, and thus coming out of innocence, coming out of nescience, ignorance, and naivety, and into the light of conscious knowing, of the intellectual higher faculties of maturity, discernment, and knowing, or gnosis, through proper understanding of both knowing thyself and knowing the external world around us through the twin pillars of knowledge of scientia and gnosis, the internal and the outer ways to understand the world. The golden mean ratio, phi, is not only unseen or metaphysical pattern, but it's also the actual physical scaffolding of not just the human being, but all form and function in nature. Hence the Vitruvian man and the Masonic formula for squaring the circle. The sacred number 5, the pentalpha, is the number and most prominent symbol of the goddess, representing Isis and Venus, the pentagonal spirograph signature of Venus that we witness in astronomy in the sky through the yearly cycle of Venus orbiting the sun, or orbiting the earth, should I say. The archetypal signature of love, divinity, and beauty is represented by the pentagram and the goddess of love, and the goddess of fertility and fecundity of nature, the mother goddess Venus, the queen of heaven. The pentagram is also the hieroglyph for the Egyptian goddess Isis. It's also known as East, also known as Esat, and the anagram, of course, and the epithet for East is the Eastern Star, which was representative of both Venus and Sirius, depending on your location and the time of year. But these were both the mother goddess, essentially known as the morning star, which was Lucifer rising in the sky. But we can't go too deep into this. We just got to skim over all of this. I've got full presentations on my YouTube channel if you want to explore all this, the linguistics and the symbolism and the mathematics, much more in depth on my channel. So again, this is the order of the Eastern Star, the Pentavalency of Nature, the mother goddess as seen through the heavens, and which influences the sacred fertility fruits and the plants of nature here on Earth, which trigger the evolution and the inspiration of human beings, as well as we will cover towards the end of this presentation. So again, the goddess Isis is represented by the hieroglyph of the 5-pointed star, the pentalpha, which represents the sacred star of Sirius. This is exactly why the smash hit esoteric sci-fi film by Luc Besson, The Fifth Element, is the quintessentia, who is the female goddess, and literally portrayed as fully activated human being, referred to as the supreme being throughout this film, with fully functional 12-strand DNA helix as depicted upon her construction. And interesting that her name is Lilu, which can also be spelled L-I-L-L-U, meaning Lilu, which was exactly comprising of the Akkadian root word of Ilu, which meant God. So this gives us the context for why her divine essence is activated and utilized to defeat the ultimate force of evil by none other than the sacred power of the 5th element, which is love, and the power to preserve life. So this is why the 5th element was literally all about love. And this was symbolically portrayed beautifully throughout the film by Luc Besson. A beautiful symbolic movie. One of the cult classics. It's one of the best movies I think that I've seen ever. It's a classic. It's a favorite of mine. The symbolic motif of 5th element was the Hieros Gamos, again the sacred marriage, the alchemical wedding between masculine and feminine principles, and through the means of the attainment of the 5th element, which is love, the divine goddess, supreme being, which represents the element of phi, the element of 5, the quintessence, the sacred element of love, the 5th element, which animates all things. This is why you'll find the primary colors of the visible light spectrum and the 4 alchemical elements from both male and female emanate from and culminate back into their purest quintessence of the white light. So now you understand exactly why, through the sacred union of love, the divine power of the orgasm between the male and female is life created and preserved. It's a and this was a symbolic representation of the sex magic and the fertility of nature itself. That's why the 5th element of love portrays the orgasmic explosion, which defeats, through the power of the 5th element, the quintessence of love and the sacred spirit, it defeats the end of the world and overcomes the ultimate forces of darkness and the ultimate forces of evil in the universe. And this was representative of the sacred sperma communion at the moment of conception, which emits a bright flash of zinc when the spermatozoon, the sacred spear of destiny, penetrates and cavitates the ovum. So it's representation of the sperm and the ovum. And again, this is why they refer to Lilu in the fifth element as perfect. We're going to skip over a lot of this, but it's referring much deeper into numerology and esoteric sex magic and the principles of the human anatomy and the principles of procreation. But so we're going to skip over that and just stick to the sacred element of 5 rather than going into the sex, or which is the hex, which is the number of 6, which is so the relationship of 6 to 5, representing the creation of life and the human being. So we're going to skip over that sex magic and stick with the phi. Interestingly enough, about the diapente, the moment of human conception is marked by a bright flash of light. Again, the flash of zinc, scientists have clearly discovered. In amazing new footage from Northwestern University of the moment of a human sperm making contact with an egg, a bright flash of zinc, again, a flash of light, is seen, which scientists found is the result of an explosion of zinc from the egg triggered by the sperm. A microcosmic cellular Big Bang that emerges out of a macrocosmic sexual Big Bang, or orgasm. The verse will never be the same. I'm glad you came. I'm glad you came. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was life in the beginning of Genesis, the generation of the gene of Isis, the Genesis. And we've covered this entire segment much more fully in my full video, which is now deleted from my YouTube channel, which my YouTube channel is now deleted. But you can still find all of these full presentations and all of these full videos and archives on my Odyssey channel, odyssey.com /Lifting the Veil. Odyssey, you find Lifting the Veil on odyssey.com, spelled Odyssee, as in C with your eyes, odyssey.com. So you can find my backup channel and most of my backup videos on there. So we covered this entire segment much more in depth, but I will briefly cover this once again. The perfect fifth harmonic, the number 5, represents the number of the human being, the physical body as shown, as well as the full explanation on the sexual creation act of the number Illuminati sacred number 23, as the 3-2 ratio of the sacred perfect fifth harmonic, and the pentavalency of man. And I don't mean that, I don't mean that in a misogynistic way. I mean that in the anthropomorphic way, or but yeah, we won't even go into that. It has been proposed by Richard Merrick, whose graphics I am showing here, the work of Richard Merrick, that the sine wave of the human spine corresponds to the perfect fifth harmonic, as well as the third harmonic partial ratio. And we will go much deeper into the sacred geometry and the mathematics of the human body and the human anatomy in my full upcoming Symbols of Power films. But that's entirely brand new discovered work that nobody has ever seen before, so I'm not going to cover that in this presentation here. We don't have time for that, number 1. And so again, the pentavalency of man, the phi ratio of the man, and the diapente. Again, see my full video on Odyssey for much more context on this. But in musical theory, the perfect fifth is the musical interval corresponding to a pair of pitches with a frequency ratio of 3-2, or very nearly so. It occurs above the root of all major and minor chords, known as triads, and their extensions. Until the late 19th century, it was often referred to by one of its Greek names, the diapente. Interestingly enough, about the diapente is that if we apply that to etymology of the actual pentagram itself and divide it in a diagonally in 2 vertically, such as bilateral symmetrically, we can see the 3-2 ratio with the 3 points of 2 halves each. Or if we cut it diagonally in half horizontally, we are left with the same 3-2 ratio yet again. 3 points to 2 points. 3 above, 2 below. Any way we divide the pente, we are left with the perfect fifth harmonic ratio. Symbolically, of course, not musically. I'm not referring to that literally. I'm just referring to that synchronistically. So maybe now you know why the Supreme Being is the perfect fifth. According to Protagoras of Abdera, man is the measure of all things. The 7 liberal arts are composed within the very structure and the nature of human beings, and the human being as a culmination of the very form and function of nature itself. And in this way, we are not separate from nature, nor set apart from that which supports us and which we are composed of. And I have to give credit on the left image, the left graphic, to Joe Dubs, because I know he's going to piss and complain that I used one of his graphics synced with all of it, even though it's literally just a superimposition of, basic, well-known images and well-known principles. But I have to give him credit, otherwise he'll piss and complain that I used his graphic in, my presentations, even though it's fair use, transformative work in showing an entirely different and brand new context and entirely new content synced with, as you can see here, with the very symbol of Westworld, the symbol of the transformation of the human being into the transhumanistic android nature of the future, of our future, of the West world, the Western world. Again, the sun sets in the West, the Western world, where the fall of civilization begins, corresponded to the Vitruvian man, which is the exact same symbolism of the burning man. Yet again, the transformation of human consciousness and the transformation of the human being into the next phase. But we will, at least I'm referring to the inorganic transformation, as opposed to what we are going to present through this presentation is the biological evolutionary transformation using the organic technology of the human genetics and the human, the optimization of the human being. And this is brand new original content. I covered the left graphic very briefly in my full Pentavalency of Nature and the goddess Venus and the Pentavalency of Man video. Again, the one I was previously referring to on Odyssey, on my Odyssey channel. But again, yet again, we see the Vitruvian man, the pentavalency in the human skull of the superior cranial fossa, superior view of the cranial fossa, which otherwise known as the cranial floor. We can see the pentavalency, the perfect pentavalency, or if you divide it perfectly down the midline, what is known as the Sushumna in Sanskrit, yogic Kundalini vernacular. We are referring to the bilateral symmetry, which is also a perfect hex, a perfect hexagram or hexagonal, a 6-axis division down the human skull, which perfectly merges with the pentavalency or the penta-axis as well, as shown and depicted here, which is the exact symbolic meaning, and this is my entirely original discovery that nobody has ever seen before. It's never been discussed. It's never been revealed, the secrets of the Westworld symbolism and the Westworld series, but this is an excerpt. The graphic on the right is an excerpt from my full written ebook presentation, Navigating the Maze and the Consciousness of Man, which is in unfinished. It's about 3/4 finished, a full video film, Symbols of Power film, that I've begun, and I never got around to finishing it, which I need to get around to finishing it. I do have the segments completed now to go ahead and finish that. But so anyways, aside from the point, we're viewing the entire series secret of the maze in Westworld. It was literally the entire symbolic essence of the entire first series of Westworld revolved around the maze, which refers to the labyrinth, the maze of consciousness. The maze is a long ancient symbol of both fertility, as above, so below the belt, as I've coined in my full Symbols of Power series. What is above the belt is a direct correspondence and correlation to what is below the belt. The sexual organs are a direct symbolic, countless ways that I've proven this and can show this, from linguistics, the etymology, the symbolism, the biology, the anatomy, every aspect you could possibly imagine. The sexual organs are a direct mirror homologous correspondence to the brain specifically, as well as various other organs above the belt. It's literally as if you fold the human being in half. What is above is directly correspondent to what is below. If you do a half fold and you fold downward, your above meets the below. Wow. Ouroborically, the symbol of the serpent eating its own tail, or rather the man eating its own you know what. But yeah, we won't go into that. So anyways, what we are viewing is the literal maze depicted in the series Westworld. It was directly representative of the human brain. We literally see the correspondence of the lateral ventricles with the exact mirror images of the optic pathways of the optic chiasm and the optic nerves meeting at the back of the brain on the occipital lobe. We literally see the head of the man depicted in the Westworld maze corresponds to the pineal body, which sits directly at the back of the lateral ventricles, as well as this little diamond shape. It looks like actually this is symbolic. This is actually a female in the Westworld maze at the center of the maze, and she's giving birth to a child. And in the series, at the very end, spoiler alert, the very finale of that series, we found that Maeve, the Maven, was the one at the center of the maze with her child. So that's what the diamond is. She's literally giving birth to a child in the symbolic image here. And the child corresponds to the pituitary gland, directly beneath the lateral ventricles of the human brain, as I've discovered and depicted here. And it's a direct correspondence. And yet again, we also find the symbolic Christian ichthys fish, the Christian fish, known as the ichthys, which literally is Greek for Greek meaning fish bladder. And that's what the Christian fish is the fish bladder. Is the ichthys, symbolic of Jesus as the resurrection, and we can't even begin to go into that. That's entire subjects for future film presentations. But so that is what the symbolic essence of the maze it's all about, the coming to awareness, the coming and the discovering of consciousness within, particularly in the series, it was both the ascension of consciousness of the androids, or the fabricants, as well as the consciousness of mankind, out of this entire process of transformation, of basically essentially becoming God. They created, the AI, the artificial intelligence, so man becomes God, and it creates an image of himself. He creates artificial intelligence in his own image, proverbially. And so that's the whole symbolic essence, and that's literally, they depict that in one of the episodes. They show the 5 stages of the pyramid of consciousness. And the peak, the capstone of the pyramid, is self-reflection, introspection, self-awareness. And again, Pythagoras, man, know thyself, and ye shall know the universe and all of its gods. So I think that's a brief summary. I covered as deeply as I think is adequate for this graphic here. I didn't just want to skip over it because, people will take it and, maybe take it out of context. So let's move on. Again, we covered this in my full video, so maybe I will skip over these segments here because I'm taking a little longer than I had expected. But again, basically, iambic pentameter is considered to give poetic rhythm and beauty to the English language, just as the perfect fifth harmonic elucidates beauty and harmony in music, just as the 5 golden mean ratio gives beauty and aesthetic form to everything in our material world, our mater, the world of the feminine world, of the mother, of Gaia, of Geo, of the earth, the feminine mother, the divine mother, Sophia, the goddess of wisdom, and the goddess of mater, or materialism, the goddess of material matter, whereas the pattern is the energetic pattern of the pater, of the father. So you have father and mother both giving spirit and matter, earth and heaven, on earth as it is in heaven, as above so below, the father mating with the mother, in ancient Egyptian known as Net or Nut and Jeb, Jeb as the earth god, impregnating the celestial sphere, the celestial cosmos. So we've covered that much more deeply in Symbols of Power Part 3 film, so we can't even begin to go into all of that. But again, iambic pentameter comes from the ancient Greek goddess Iambe, the goddess of poetry and humor. She made Demeter laugh her ass off by lifting her dress and showing off her yone. known as Balbo, the face of laughter upon a sacred yoni. And so we get into the implosive phase conjugation of the wave harmonics that determines fractality of the human DNA. And again, communicating the intrinsic ideal pattern, structure, or form of nature. And it's a template, or in other words, a pattern, a pater, the masculine within the divine feminine mater of the matter. The pattern of the father is what impregnates the material world and gives rise to matter, which we find in all of nature, in all of creation. And it's a template, a guideline for what communicates strong fractality, or in other words, symmetry. Divine symmetry is how we define beauty in nature. And what the ancient Hermeticists, such as the Greeks and the Egyptians, used to publicly portray and display in their artwork as being the divine proportion, which is what the health and fitness and strong genetic potential displays itself as in physical form. The Neoplatonists had come to know it as the good and the beautiful. And yet again, let's take this opportunity to destroy racism and critical race theory and all of that, Disney promoted nonsense, and far left, extreme left, racist nonsense, because we find the divine template, the divine pattern of beauty throughout all races, all cultures, all history, the world over. It's the same universal pattern of beauty that applies universally. It is universal wisdom of Sophia, of the divine feminine and the divine masculine father, imbuing that structural divinity within all of nature. I'm certain that this is why men are inherently physically attracted or stimulated like moths to a flame to women who exhibit more symmetrical, or in other words, closer to the perfect golden ratio physical traits. Those perfect golden assets, those notorious curves born from the golden spiral, the breasts, the ass, the cheekbones, lips, hips, etc. Because it's their DNA communicating through this divine, universal, intrinsic language of mathematics to our DNA that they have strong genes ready to produce healthy, vibrant, vigorous, and perfectly symmetrical offspring. Healthier offspring. And we find this all throughout nature. The closer an organism is to the divine structure of the golden mean ratio and the divine perfect geometry, sacred geometrical patterns of nature. And this is not to put, ugly people down or to make anyone feel excluded. This is simply the divine, what we all strive for and achieve for. This is literally the true meaning of good genes, the true meaning of eugenics, healthy eugenics, meaning the secrets of mankind, our genetics, and how to create the most divine human being that we possibly can. This is the secret knowledge that every human being, the secret manual that every human being should be taught and should be passed on to everyone, because these are the secrets of holistic nutritional science, physical fitness, and all of these things that literally transform your body to make you more beautiful, make you more healthy, make you stronger, make you feel better, make you live longer, make your reach your full genetic potential. Anyone who's in the bodybuilding world understands that term, reaching your full genetic potential. It means you literally get as big and as ripped and as your muscles fill out into a perfect, divine, sacred geometrical symmetry. The more ripped you get, your muscles start to reveal much more of the sacred geometrical patterns of nature. And I'm not going to get into that. We can't get into that in this presentation. That's an entirely original secret that I've got planned for some of my full, they're actually almost finished, my next Symbols of Power film series. So we will get into that later on. But we see the examples of this here in this graphic that I've depicted, the golden aspect ratio, that's play on words, the golden ass, which was literally a very popular book by Lucius Apiculi, I forget his name, but a very popular book, The Golden Ass. So I play on that. Again, the golden apple, the forbidden fruit, the verboten fruit of the garden of earthly delights, taking a bite of wisdom of the goddess, the divine mother Sophia, and her divine structural pattern of nature, which we find all throughout, especially the human anatomy, probably more so than many other mammals or even other organisms in nature, because the human being is literally one of the highest evolutions of the golden mean principle in nature. We find the structure of implosion. We will get much deeper into the structure here through this presentation is extremely powerful. It's the structure of implosion, of vortex-based mathematics, the structure of the torus field, which is the structure of perpetuity and perfect balance, perfect regulation of heat and cold, hot and cold, the duality of nature, the polarity of nature, perfectly expressed through the golden mean ratio, the golden mean spiral, which is the physics of implosion and explosion, which is both masculine and feminine perfectly united. And we find that's the meaning of the sexual organs, is the explosion of the masculine and the implosion or cavitation of the feminine. She takes and she sucks into herself in order to implode. And when again, back to what we've previously covered, with the spermatozoan punctures or punctuates, or the punctus creates the circumpunct. The circle gets punctured by the phallic sphere of destiny and sets forth, and it punctures that sphere, and then the sphere then literally begins to cavitate, and it collapses into itself, and it begins the cellular division. That singular sphere of creation, that egg, that ovum, becomes punctuated or punctured, just as when an organism is born out of the egg, it has to puncture that egg and destroy that world in order to be reborn into a new world. And so that is the process that sets forth the cycles of nature and creation. And so this will lead us deeper into our next slides. Again, these are from excerpts from my full presentations on the phi cavitation and the golden mean ratio in nature, and the physics, the entire physics of structural cavitation and divine human anatomy. Once again, the phi ratio represents the essence of cavitation itself. Once again, when a sphere gets charged with energy, it oscillates to the point of punctuation and implosion. It is the implosion that is the big bang that sets forth the cycle of life. And we find that in the cavitation or the what's known as the star in a jar simulations of sonoluminescence, where they literally vibrate an oscillating sound wave to such a strong frequency that it actually punctures a bubble inside a hermetically sealed container. And that cavitation of the bubble produces a spark, a divine light, a divine spark, or a big bang of energy so powerful that it simulates the heat of the sun itself. And it's literally cavitates and emits a glow of light. It's literally how stars are actually created, is they cavitate. They implode within themselves, and that's how stars are created in the cosmos. It is through physics of sex magic and the principles of cavitation. So let's move on to the next slide, or we can see again this entire original compilation of examples of what's known as the cardioid figure that I've compiled here in the graphic on the right hand side, the golden mean ratio, the doctrine of signatures that we find throughout all of nature. At the bottom left we find Victor Genius, the water wizard of the 1900s, on the same level as Nikola Tesla, who was the electrical wizard. Victor Schauberger was his equal in the field of water, cavitation physics, and inventions and energy. And this was his golden plow that he designed in order to enrich the soil with vibrant microbiota and microbacteria in order to allow the crops to thrive. And he designed his plow based on the golden mean cavitation physics of nature itself. And I don't think he even understood consciously just how that exact structure is found all throughout nature, the way I have depicted here in this correlation. So I will show you all the examples here. So his golden plow is on the bottom left-hand corner. That is literally the same structure. It's known as a cardioid figure, meaning a heart-shaped structure. That is literally the structure of the human heart. It is literally the structure. Oh, I've got another example that is absolutely perfect, that isn't included in this graphic, but I discovered another one. It's literally, there's a depiction of a goose, a mother goose, and her wings are uplifted, and it's literally the exact structure of Victor Schauberger's golden plow here. The mother goose's neck is exactly with the handle of this plow, and her wings are uplifted to the side exactly in the she literally curves them and I can't show you that because I don't have it uploaded for this presentation, but it will be in future presentations. So I did a play on words. It's the golden plow. He designed it off the golden ratio, and it's also literally, it's the color of gold. It's color gold, but that's aside from the point. So it's a play on words. The golden plow, to plow that golden ass, because again, it's literally the structure of sex here. Also, that is the structure of the goose. That is the structure of the cardioid figure through all these depictions here in nature. And I don't mean that to be vulgar. That is just how it is. Literally, here's the phallic pillar. Think of this as literally, it's the goddess, laying on her stomach. This is literally the buttocks, and it is being penetrated by the phallic pillar directly in the center. It is literally, and a play on words, the golden plow, to plow that golden ass. And again, the book, a very popular, very well-known book, The Golden Ass. So it's a play on words, but it's literal in nature. It is literally the golden plow, to plow that golden ass. With the perfect golden aspect ratio. This is the structure of the human brain. We find the cardioid figure of the lateral ventricles, as well as the hippocampus, which follows the same contour along with the lateral ventricles. We find, again, it's literally the golden chalice within the human brain. It's the same structure of the cavitation bubble. It's the same structure as the torus of the apple, also synced here with the same exact structure of the barn owl's face, or the owl, the Vesica Pisces, the geometry of the sacred owl, which represents the sacred goddess of what? Does the sacred owl represent? The goddess Ishtar, the goddess Venus, love, beauty, fertility, the demon goddess of the nighttime, of the underworld, the goddess of sexuality and fertility and reproduction. Ishtar, Venus, the goddess of love, the mother of the queen of heaven, the divine feminine aspect in all her forms. The same structure as the human brain, the same structure again of Victor Schauberger's inventions here, the same structure of the human eyeball, the cardioid torus structure, the same structure of literally the mathematical cardioid itself, which we find all throughout the physics of light, the reflection of light, the physics of, countless examples. I could go on and on and on. The structure of the human lungs and the human rib cage, when viewed superficially from above, is literally the same structure of the cavitation implosion of the cardioid physics, and the structure of the bivalves, or clams, again, which is a symbol of the goddess vulva, the goddess of sexuality. Venus was born from what? She was born from an oyster or a clam, which is, again, Sandro Botticelli's depiction of the birth of Venus, where Venus is depicted being birthed out of a clam, which is the vulva. It's the goddess. This is the same exact structure of a horse's ass, or a horse vagina. It's everywhere, all throughout nature. We have the Geoduck Clam, which literally looks like a giant horse penis. I know that's vulgar, but that's the physics of nature. I'm sorry, that's just how it is. Look up the Geoduck Clam. Literally, it looks like a horse penis, and then you have the other bivalves, the other clams and oysters, and known as mussels, representing the female love muscle, literally representing the goddess vulva, as I've depicted countless times in my full Easter, Occult Secrets of Easter, and Ishtar, and the estrogen and estrus, and so many other links to all of that throughout my video series as well. The implosion cavitation of the cavitating bubble, the Greek letter phi, is literally represents the phi ratio, is literally the lowercase Greek letter phi, and the uppercase Greek letter phi also represents is the exact structure of sex magic. It is the phallic pillar punctuating the feminine ovum, which is the exact structure of the torus field, the physics of nature itself. We find it in the dove breast, we find it in the elephant ear fern with the ankh at the center of it, on and on and on. Countless examples. So we went and spent way too much time on that, but I can't just let it go. So again, that's the physics of the sex magic of nature, the 1 and the 0, the binary code of nature, of how you code or program the structure of the physics of the matrix, which is Latin, means womb, as we've covered throughout the Symbols of Power film series. And again, it's the penetration, the punctuation of the ovum. It is the circumpunct, is known as the circle dot is the circumpunct. It means the circumference, the Circe, the goddess circle, being punctured or punctuated. And a punctuation is a period. It is a dot. And the feminine has her what? She has her period, which represents periodicity. A period represents a point in time. That is what we have, a period. That's why you go to first period, second period, third period in school. It's a point in time. The period is a punctuation. It is the beginning of time. It is taking the nothingness of the nous of the universe and punctuating it to create the division, which creates time and space itself. The sacred geometry of division, of cellular division, of the division and the structuring and segmentation of space-time to create space and matter and all of physical, everything in creation itself. It is the secrets of the universe, the secrets of life itself. The principal elements of sacred geometry. And again, we notice the cavitating punctuation of the physics of implosion. The cavitating phi ratio physics of implosion and punctuation in nature. The left is an image that I have put together. Again, the cardioid heart cavitation. Again, the heart is literally a cavitating organ. The blood actually cavitates and vortexes, spirals into the heart, which is a twisting, torquing muscle structure. It doesn't just pump. It generates its power from a twisting, torquing, cavitating structure of the human heart. And we find this very same structure within the creation of life, of both the feminine uterus. We find it again where the egg is invaginated, or in other words, it is cavitated. That's what the term invagination means. That's why she has a vagina, which means she has a cavity. It's imploding. It's an opening, which is what a vagina is. Vagina means a sheath. It is an opening. That's what the term invagination means. And this is an image from Dan Winter here. We're depicting the cavitation of the ovum by the sperm, which then again triggers the cellular division. It's literally the heart, the cardioid shape of the uterus of the human heart. Again, as above, so below the belt. As above, in the brain, in the heart, in the chest cavity, in the rib cage, in the human heart itself, and in the uterus as well. As above, so below the belt, as I have coined throughout my film series. The sperm's charge, again, penetrates and punctuates the ovum. Sets forth the course of life, the Big Bang. And again, just as I was describing, here's another depiction, the two hearts, one form. The human chest cavity in an MRI scan reveals the lungs and the perfect golden mean ratio, 5 spirals, 2 of them cavitating, where? Directly at the center of the human heart is the cavitation physics, implosion physics of the human rib cage and the human chest cavity and the lungs, which the lungs are what? They are cavitating. The air expands and contracts in our lungs. It is expansion and contraction, the physics of nature. Expansion is masculine. Cavitation or implosion is feminine. The human heart lies directly at the center of this cavitating 0-point physics of nature, just as the exact same mirror image of the uterus, as above, so below the belt. The human uterus in the first trimester depicts the perfect cardioid phi golden ratio cavitation, where the heart corresponds directly to the child in the uterus as the exact same structure. Homologous structure, which means basically it's representative as the fetus. So the mother's chest cavity is a fractal of her womb. where two hearts cavitate, both in unison, her heart beating above, as well as the heart of the fetus in her uterus down below. As above, so below. Two hearts beating in unison, in perfect synchrony. Two hearts, one form, one physical structure of nature. And this is why the child, or the fetus, is known as the fruit, the sacred fertility fruit of the tree of knowledge. Because the child is the fruit, literally the fruit of her labor. It is the fruit. The child is the fruit of our labor. When the mother goes into labor, she gives birth, which is literally the coming to fruition. You take the word fruition, has the word fruit within it. The fruit coming to fruition means picking the fruit of the tree of life, of the tree of knowledge. And again, the biblical meaning of knowledge means to know, which literally means sex. It means reproduction, as in he came to know her, which is why I want to get to know you, girl. Because you come to know somebody intimately in the most sacred aspect. And in the sacred geometrical structure of the cardioid cavitating physics of the womb, of the creation of the child, which is the fruit of the tree of knowledge, the apple that Eve ate of the tree of knowledge was about reproduction. It was about sex and the fertility and the reproductive fruit of life, which is why it's the forbidden fruit. The verboten fruit is the knowledge of sexuality and the knowledge of procreation and the knowledge of the physics of nature and the physics of creation of life itself. And the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Where we get the phrase from, because the child is the fruit, the coming to fruition of the hierosgamos, of the sacred communion, the common union, from Latin cum, or Greek, or Latin cum, which is literally the same meaning of com, spelled C-O-M and C-U-M. Cum literally means together. It means with, together, which is why you graduate cum laude, or with honors. Because when you graduate, you are reaping the fruits of your hard labor, of the 12 years of education or more. 14, 16, 18 years of education, you're reaping the graduation, the fruits of your labor. You are coming to fruition. You are receiving the laurels. Literally, the laurels were literally the wreath crown that you receive at graduation of the university in ancient Greece. You receive your laurels, hence the term resting on your laurels. In other words, resting on your achievements. The laurel, a laureate, comes from, we can't even begin to go into that. The roots of gold, the golden crown, the golden halo of the sun, the halo of enlightenment, the aura, the aureate, the laureate, the glorious halo of the sun, of HOLOS, the hallowed holy halo of the sun. But so the apple literally means fruit. The apple of the tree is literally the fruit. The fruit is the reproductive organ of the tree. The fruit contains the seed, and it is literally what is dropped off of the tree in order to reproduce a new tree. The fruit is the reproductive organ of the tree. So in other words, we have another depiction here of the vascular tree of life in the human placenta. And again, we notice the umbilicus of the child coming from the placenta literally has little vascular trees inside the placenta. And the placenta itself also is a fractal depiction of the tree of life. The life is the vascular tree. It is what circulates the blood, known as the blood of life. And the ancients used to believe that the blood was the source of life. Then they also believed that the breath was the source of life. And the truth is, and then they also believed that the waters, the seed, the sperm, the seed is also the breath of life. These are all the aspects that make life possible. And so we find the vascular tree of life and the reproductive tree of knowledge and the tree of life once again. So, but also I want to point out here, notice the structure of the umbilicus is literally the spiral cavitation, as we covered in Symbols of Power Part 3 film on my channel. The implosive cavitation, it's a vortex, it is a twisting spiral. It is an imploding, and it literally implodes in the center of our stomach, the center of the torso, the center of the torus, the core of the apple, known as the hyperboloid, which is hyperbole. And it is literally the implosive structure that implodes into the child to feed the child the nourishment through the blood vessels. Is literally the implosion point, as is literally the umbilicus. And we covered this in Symbols of Power Part 3 fully. The umbilicus of the world, the world navel, was known as the Axis Mundi, is literally known as the world pillar. The world structure is literally the Axis Mundi is the navel of the world. This is why the Axis Mundi is literally the core of the apple, is this pillar, is the world axis. In other words, it's the umbilicus. And this was literally why the umbilical cord represents the electrical structure known as a Birkeland current in physics. It is a twisting, intertwining, woven electrical filaments that span the entire electric universe, the cosmos. But I'm going way off track. So let's stick on track. Again, the verboten fruit of nature, yet again, just to rehash. And this again is the same structure of the logarithmic torso, or the toroid of the human torso, the implosion physics of the human body. Literally the structure of the human body and the human form. Yet again, here is the hyperbolic torso, which represents the hyperboloid. The hyperboloid is literally an hourglass. It's better known as the hourglass. I mean, just think an hourglass is a hyperboloid. That is the structure, especially of women, of the torso of a woman. We praise the woman for her hourglass shape figure. That women try to achieve that figure because that figure is the perfect mathematical perfection of the toroidal structure. Again, the golden mean physics of cavitation and implosion in nature. That's why women try to achieve that structure. And yet again, that's why this body positivity, not to denigrate or make anyone feel excluded, but that's why you should not be comfortable with an unhealthy figure or an unhealthy form. You need to improve that, not just for your own quality of life, your longevity, your health and wellness, as well as your self-esteem. Sure, I encourage you should have self-esteem without that, but you should be doing all of the practices that I'm going to educate you on and inform you throughout all of my presentations here as to how you can actually live the healthiest, most fit, most sexy, most perfect life that you can possibly attain in this lifetime, which is the goal of why we're here. The goal of what we are trying to achieve as a human species is to achieve the perfection of the mathematics and geometry of nature itself. We are created in the image of God, and the image of God is sacred geometry, and that's why we have to achieve, we don't have to, but our goal, the goal of evolution, is to achieve the physics of the structure of the mathematics of God itself, which is the implosion physics of the torus field, the very structure that gives our body form. And the more deformed and out of shape we get, the less implosive, the less electrical life force that our muscles contract and can hold within our body, and the less health that our genes express. Because again, the physical form is an expression of our genes, the health of our genetics. That's why you can look at someone who is beautiful, and it means their genetic structure is literally more healthy. It means it's why we revere physical beauty, because it means that person has strong, good, healthy genes, and it means we should procreate with them in order to evolve the human species to its proper trajectory, to its most healthy and accurate trajectory. And that's why we view physical attraction and physical beauty as symmetry. That's why we view symmetry in the mathematics of nature as beauty, because that's the trajectory that the human species is supposed to be going in. Not this woke SJW, fake, woke, racist, garbage crap about body positivity and, being fat and overweight and morbidly obese is healthy. They're trying to kill you. That is the media and the corporations trying to kill you either quickly or slowly. They're trying to make you susceptible to viral outbreaks and all that sort of nonsense by living an unhealthy, imperfect life of yeah, but I'm rambling on and on and on. So again, we see the cardioid pectoralis, the cardioid form in the pectoralis muscles, the pectoralis major, literally corresponds, notice the circular structure literally corresponds to the cephalic, or the cephalic veins. Cephalic means head. I don't know why that's called the cephalic veins. They're not linked to the head whatsoever, but that's what they're called. It literally reveals the perfect toroidal shape of the human torso, which is the same exact toroidal structure of the phi. Again, the phi ratio of the torus. And torus comes from the root word of torque, which means to twist, which is why our torso is literally the part of our body that allows us to twist back and forth. Come on, baby, let's do the twist. Because that is the structure of the cavitation of nature. Twisting is what generates power. The harder you can twist and work those obliques, the more ripped your abs get and the more power you hold in your core. And the more powerful your core is, the stronger and sexier and more healthy you become. The more deeper you can, the more breath you can hold in those cavitating lungs. The more oxygen you can hold in your body. The more oxygen, the more life force. The more oxygen, the more you oxygenate and fuel your brain. The more you fuel your brain, the more powerful your brain cells. The more fractal and more mathematic the structure of your imploding torus field brain becomes. The more intelligent you become. The more independent, powerful, less susceptible to control and mind control. The more dangerous you become to controllers and SJWs and communists and Marxists trying to control the world. The more independent and powerful and less controlled you become. The more independent and the healthier you become. But I'm rambling off on a tangent yet again. So let's move on. The ancients openly depicted this in their art and is lost in the art of today, especially the SJW Disney Tumblr style, art of the current woke politics and, the comic books of, Marvel and DC sold out to, just total SJW corporations like Disney and, racist corporations like that. But so we found this structure in the knowledge and the wisdom of the ancients. They knew about all of this, which is why they depicted it in all of their art. But only present in the corporate logos and product marketing, while simultaneously we are reverting to revere, settling for being unhealthy. And again, as I've already discussed in the last slide, and disproportionate, which is great for self-esteem, but rewards complacency and reluctance to change, to actually reflect our inner beauty, which more intrinsically reflects alignment with the divine proportion without distortion, which really and genuinely satisfies the inner self, the soul, the spirit, the consciousness within, or our self-esteem, our knowing that you are physically and mentally healthier with proper lifestyle changes that affect genetic expression and upregulates genes that protect from disease and promote longevity, while downregulating those genes that express chronic disease. This is real eugenics, epigenetic eugenics, not artificial designer babies, test tube babies purchased by some elites in Silicon Valley. This is a change at the fundamental lifestyle level, at the very root cause, the core of our being, which is both fulfilling, something that superficial surgeries and genetic hacking and life hacking does not attain, and nor does it affect the core epigenetic level of healthy expression. So the body is a temple, not a graveyard, and this is where the rubber meets the road, where the mental knowledge that I have just downloaded you with actually meets into direct practice that you can utilize in your life to become the healthiest, most beautiful, most physically fit and attractive, strongest genetic human being that you possibly can. The body is a temple, not a graveyard.
Theory that I think is as important as Darwin's Origin of Species. It advances the idea that it was fruit and not meat that gave human beings our unique style of intelligence, and he also posits the revolutionary idea that our relationship with plants has in some sense been a sexual one, that we haven't just evolved alongside them the way animals usually do in symbiosis with their food source, but that the chemistry of fruit has had an unusually active role in changing our species dramatically. There was a period of time in our history when all of a sudden the brains of our ancestors tripled in size very quickly, and the modern neocortex came into existence with a bang. And Tony suggests that this coincided with our ancestors living in the tropical rainforest at the time when they had access to fruit all year round and were eating more fruit by weight than any other animal. Now, a lot of animals eat fruit, but not in the quantities that we did. The larger herbivores, for instance, tend towards green leaves, and amongst primates, we do see that trend reflected, that the ones who eat more fruit are smarter, whereas those who eat more leaves are bigger and stronger, but less intelligent. So here already we have a very basic clue that if our fruit-eating habits were unique and our intelligence appears to be unique, perhaps the two are related, because for those who say it was meat that made the human brain grow big, I always wonder, why hasn't it had the same effect on other animals that eat meat? In fact, the fossil record shows that since leaving the rainforest, our brains have been shrinking fairly steadily, and this may have been a result of not having access to the same quantity of fruit and relying instead on things like meat and root vegetables that are clearly not optimal since they need to be cooked to be edible. So why is this an almost sexual relationship with fruit then? Well, Tony's theory suggests that one of the key mechanisms by which plants influenced our species dramatically comes from the fact that the fruit of a plant is the equivalent of a mammal's uterus. Fruit is a reproductive organ, and so the hormones it contains are about generating and shaping life. Therefore, if ancient man was eating kilos and kilos of fruit every day, if it was the main thing in his diet, then he would be flooding his bloodstream with chemicals that made it a bit like a reproductive environment flowing through his veins. And some of these hormones were triggering hormonal switches on our DNA and changing the way it was read by the body, therefore causing unusually dramatic shifts in our species over a very short period of time. If you want to read more about what these changes were, the increase in brain size, of course, extended juvenility, and so on, I'll link to Tony's books below this video. But the point of making this is to say...
All right. So that was one of my good friends who I highly respect, Carrie McCarthy, and her video on her YouTube channel. I highly recommend subscribing to her. She produces great content. But now I want to tie that segment, yet again, that segment exactly syncs with everything that I am and have shown throughout this presentation and will continue to show in the next segments. But I want to now move on to an epigenetic presentation by the amazing Dr. Dean Ornish, who is literally one of the most, I consider him one of the top gurus, true spiritual and scientific gurus on the planet. Literally the father of epigenetics, essentially. Most of us are, think of Bruce Lipton as, pioneering the epigenetic field, whereas actually Dr. Dean Ornish and his colleague Elizabeth Blackburn are the pioneers of the field of epigenetics. They're the first ones and the ones who actually published the peer-reviewed studies proving epigenetics and the power of epigenetic potential. So let's witness this short presentation by Dr. Ornish explaining how we become the best human that we possibly can be.
Shown. Another is to change our lifestyles. And what we're learning is how powerful and dynamic these changes can be, that you don't have to wait very long to see the benefits. When you eat healthier, manage stress, exercise, and love more, your brain actually gets more blood flow and more oxygen. But more than that, your brain gets measurably bigger. Things that were thought impossible just a few years ago can actually be measured now. This was figured out by Robin Williams a few years before the rest of us. Now, there's some things that you can do to make your brain grow new brain cells. Some of my favorite things like chocolate and tea, blueberries, alcohol in moderation, stress management, and cannabinoids found in marijuana. I'm just the messenger. What were we just talking about? And other things that can make it worse. It can cause you to lose brain cells, the usual suspects like saturated fat and sugar, nicotine, opiates, cocaine, too much alcohol, and chronic stress. Your skin gets more blood flow when you change your lifestyle, so you age less quickly. Your skin doesn't wrinkle as much. Your heart gets more blood flow. We've shown that you can actually reverse heart disease, that these clogged arteries that you see in the upper left, after only a year, become measurably less clogged. And the cardiac PET scan shown in the lower left, the blue means no blood flow. A year later, orange and white is maximal blood flow. We've shown you may be able to stop or reverse the progression of early prostate cancer, by extension, breast cancer, simply by making these changes. We found that tumor growth in vitro was inhibited 70% in the group that made these changes, whereas only 9% in the comparison group. These differences were highly significant. Even your sexual organs get more blood flow, so you increase sexual potency. One of the most effective anti-smoking ads was done by the Department of Health Services, showing that nicotine, which constricts your arteries, can cause a heart attack or a stroke, but it also causes impotence. Half of guys who smoke are impotent. How sexy is that? Now, we're about to publish 2 new studies, one in collaboration with Dr. Elizabeth Blackburn, who won a Lasker Prize a couple of years ago for discovering telomerase. Telomerase is an enzyme that repairs telomeres, which are the ends of your chromosomes that control how long you live, obviously pretty important. And what we showed is that simply in just 3 months, by making these simple changes, you can actually increase your telomerase, thereby lengthening your telomeres and living longer. And we're also about to publish a study, the first study showing you can change gene expression in men with prostate cancer. This is what's called a heat map, and the different colors, and along the side on the right are different genes. And we found that over 500 genes were favorably changed, in effect turning on the good genes, the disease-preventing genes, turning off the disease-promoting genes. And so these findings, I think, are really very powerful. They're giving many people new hope and new choices. And companies like Navigenics and DNA Direct and 23andMe that are giving you your genetic profiles are getting some people a sense of, gosh, well, what can I do about it? Well, our genes are not our fate, and if we make these changes, they're a predisposition. But if we make bigger changes than we might have made otherwise, we can actually change how our genes are expressed. Thank you.
So again, that's a presentation by Dr. Dean Ornish. He has multiple incredible, groundbreaking books. I highly recommend his work. I highly recommend him. He's literally one of the best on the planet, hands down, bar none, for just about everything. He's truly a life-saving hero. He's truly one of the best on the planet today. And I highly recommend his books. So let's move on to, again, our relationship or our symbiosis with plants to optimize our human genetic expression and our epigenetic expression, once again, through our sexual symbiosis with plants. The law of correspondence is also known as the doctrine of signatures, applies. And this excerpt from Wikipedia, dating from the time of Dioscorides and Galen, states that herbs resembling various parts of the body, and this is an excerpt from my full ebook presentation, which you can find again at my archives at subscribestar.com/liftingtheveil for far more context and far more information that this segment is excerpt from. So again, the time of Dioscorides and Galen states that herbs resembling various parts of the body can be used by herbalists to treat ailments of those body parts. A theological justification, as stated by botanists such as William Coles, was that God would have wanted to show men what plants would be useful for what, by simulating, again, those plants and the structure, a homologous structure to the human organs and the human biology, and not just human anatomy, but again, patterns, fractal patterns all throughout nature. The structures that give rise to plants and the same structure that human beings evolved out of those structures in plants. Human beings evolved, if you want to go by the official evolution theory, human beings evolve from, we are the fruits of the tree of life. We are the fruit that falls from the trees of nature in evolutionarily, known as the evolutionary or phylogenetic tree of life. Paracelsus in 1493 to 1541 developed the concept, writing that nature marks each growth according to its curative benefit. The botanist William Coles supposed that God had made herbs for the use of men, and again, humans, not men and humans, men and women, so sexist nonsense, and hath given them particular signatures whereby man may read the use of them. And so again, the signatures and the patterns of nature of plants are meant to disclose the healing powers of nature to humankind. The writings of Jacob Boehme spread the doctrine of signatures. He suggested that God marked objects with a sign or a signature for their purpose. Plants bearing parts that resembled human body parts, animals, or other objects were thought to have useful relevance to those parts, animals, or objects. The signature could sometimes also be identified in the environments or specific sites in which the plants grew. Boehme's 1621 book, The Signature of All Things, gave its name to the doctrine of signatures. The English physician-philosopher Sir Thomas Browne, in his discourse The Garden of Cyrus, uses the quincunx pattern as an archetype of the doctrine of signatures, pervading the design of gardens and orchards, botany and the macrocosm at large. And this graphic that I've depicted here is a law of correspondence between the human brain, the corpus callosum, and the oyster mushroom, directly corresponding and relating to the same geometric structure of the human brain. And I've got multiple different examples of the human brain corresponding to the structure of the mushroom, the sacred mushroom, the wise dome, the wisdom attained from the wise dome of the skull, corresponding to the wise dome of the sacred cap of the mushroom. And cap, of course, means the head. The head. Which is why, again, we find here the lines of the oyster mushroom directly correspond to the corona radiata and the neural fibers of the corona radiata of the human brain, of the human cerebrum. Direct correspondence here with the oyster mushroom to the corona radiata. And again, which means radiant crown in Latin, just to mind you. So yet again, the sex magic power of the structure of physics of nature is what forms the structure of the human brain and the human spinal column. The sex magic power symbol of the masculine pillar, again, the Axis Mundi, the world pillar, and the feminine archway, or the vault of heaven, overarching the masculine pillar, which is the spinal cord. And the vault of heaven, again, the cerebrum, the cerebral cortex, overarching the masculine pillar, which penetrates the feminine archway. Yet again, this is literally the power symbol in electronics. It is the line, the phallic line, penetrating the circle, or the arch. The penis penetrating the womb. As above in the brain, so below the belt, in the sexual anatomy of procreation. What generates the 1 and the 0, the binary code of nature that literally generates power, electrical power, and power of energy in nature, the brain power of nature. And we find this direct correspondence homologously with the human brain to the reishi mushroom. The same exact symbolism, the same exact law of correspondence and doctrine of signatures to the human spinal system, the human spinal cord, the roots of the dendritic nerve endings stemming from the central axis of the brain. Directly correspondent to the sex magic of the fertility of mushrooms of nature, yet again. The same structure of cavitation, same form as the Geoduck Clam. The law of correspondence and the fractality of the fertility of the penis envy of the mushroom. Complete with its cap, which is the head. And again, the mushroom that we see is literally the reproductive organ of the mushroom. The actual body of the mushroom is the mycelia, the mycelial network of dendritic veins that grow throughout the soil underneath the ground. And the mycelium is literally the neural brain that communicates to that. The mycelium in the ground is literally the neural electrical pathways that every other plant organism that grows out of the ground uses to communicate with each other. They all communicate to each other through their root systems connected by these mycelial networks. The mushroom and the mycelium is literally the brain and the mind, the universal consciousness itself. It is literally the intelligence of nature. It's how Mother Nature communicates, is through the mycelial maps, the mycelial nets or webs underneath the soil. It's absolutely incredible, truly astounding science. And yet again, we find the corona radiata of the projection fibers directly correspondent and the fractal nature of the symbiosis with the oyster. Yet again, the cavitation of the muscle, of the female love muscle. Oh, okay, so I do have coming up here, so back to the sexual magic of nature. We find the pearl at the center of the oyster. The pearl is exactly correspondent with the lentiform nucleus, which is the thalamus, literally the very core, the golden egg found in the center of the human brain. Directly correspondent, yet again, with the oyster shell with the corona radiata projection fibers of the brain. Directly correspondence of nature. Directly correspondence of nature. Here is what I've been telling you about this whole time. The Geoduck Clam. Literally the exact same structure as a horse penis. I mean, I know it's vulgar, but I'm sorry. That's just how it is in nature. Here's a little girl harvesting geoduck clams from it's a massive clam. It's humongous. And so yet again, this is on the left, the geoduck clam, the physics of nature. This is the masculine physics of nature, representation anatomically of nature, coming from the very most primordial organisms. And on the right, we have the exact same, again, physics, phi physics cavitation implosion structure of the feminine aspect of the bivalve. A bivalve meaning two valves. And it's the same structure as the female anatomy, which is what? It has two valves. The bivalve of a clam is known as a bivalve because it has an in valve and an out valve. One sucks inward, the other shoots outward. A clam or a bivalve is literally a filter of the ocean. It sucks water in, it cavitates and implodes inward, and then also shoots out through an outward valve. In other words, it's the exact structure of the torus field. The torus field has an in valve, it sucks in at one end, and it shoots out at the other end. Exactly like the torus field of the female ass. The female anatomy has an in valve, a cavitating inward valve, and an excretory outward valve. The female is a bivalve. It's the same exact, comes from the structure of the bivalve of the clams of nature, which is why the female has a clam. She's got a bearded clam. And again, it's the same structure as the golden ratio, the same structure, again, of Victor Schauberger's golden ratio plow. Again, the masculine and the feminine. The masculine penetrates the feminine. Same structure, though. And here's what I was just explaining. The structure of the bivalve. It's literally the same structure as a horse. It has a female horse, a male. Not a male, a mare. Female mare. You know, this is the exact structure of a mare, a horse's ass. You know, it's the bivalve. You have the anus and the vaginal cavity. The exact same structure. The exact same structure as the vulva. The exact same structure as the bivalve and the bivolve. The valve and the vulva are literally etymologically connected, etymologically linked. The vulva is a valve. The vulve is a valve. And it's the exact same structure. It's the female love muscle, the goddess love muscle of Venus. The Venus is Venus, is Viernus, meaning Friday, is linked with Venice, the city of love in Italy. Veneris, meaning Latin meaning love, or veneration, literally meaning Venus, is Veneris, is love and veneration, which gives us venereal diseases, is the transmission of love. This STDs, sexually transmitted diseases through love making, which is why the oyster, the bivalve, the love muscle of the goddess of the bivalve, is the symbol of the vulva, the exact anatomical structure. The bivalves consist of an inlet and an outlet. Again, the flow of energy, impulsion and implosion. And this is why the oyster is linked to oester, ester, the root of estrogen, of estrus, with the literal meaning of Aphrodite, which is why Aphrodite gives us the word aphrodisiac, which was the oysters were considered an aphrodisiac for fertility properties. And the word veni literally means I came, as in Veneris, Viernus, Venice, venerate, venereal. The vulva, the oyster, the estrogen, and I've covered this so much more fully in my full, again, my Easter, my full Occult Secrets of Easter presentation and the Goddess Venus. So much more, which is where this excerpt is from. And here we find another example of the doctrine of signatures in nature from the sun-dried peach. And women on Instagram, young girls on Instagram, know all about the peach emoji. Don't you, ladies? That the peach is symbolic of. I think they usually use the peach as a symbol of an ass, but maybe they use it as interchangeable with the symbol of the vulva. But it's the same. It's equivalent for both. I mean, it's useful for both, symbolic of both the ass and the vulva. Which is why sun-dried apricots, or a peach, apricot literally means sun peach. That's what the word apricot means, and it comes from the root word of apricate, meaning to bask in the sun. Which is why when you're basking in the sun, you're outside sunning your peach. Which is why we have the old phrase, do I dare to eat a peach? And why we have peach fuzz. Because the peach fuzz is the peach of the vulva. It's the peach of the goddess fertility fruits of nature. The doctrine of signatures. The law of correspondence. Life's a peach, and then you have one, and you take it, and you eat it. And it's juicy, and it's sweet, and delicious. Again, apricate, to bask in the sun drying your apricots, sunning your peach. Another example is the fertility fruit of the forbidden fruit of the tree of life was also arguably known to have been known as the fig or the fig tree. The fig comes from Latin fic, or we know the word German fic also means in English it's known as F-U-C-K. In other languages it's known as fic. Fic means the act of sex. It comes from Latin ficus. The ficus tree. The fig comes from the ficus tree, and which is why the fig is the symbol of sexual reproduction and fertility, because the fig contains thousands of seeds inside. The fig is literally the exact law of correspondence as both the male testes and the bladder and the female uterus. All exact representations of the fig. And the male prostate has all of these dendrites located inside the prostate, directly correspondent with the seeds within the fig, directly correspondent with the shape and structure of the female uterus. The fig is the forbidden fertility fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the tree of knowledge of sex and reproduction and fertility. The fig is representative of sex and fertility. Again, the symbol of love and reproduction. We find more examples of the law of correspondence between the fruits of nature and the structure of the human anatomy. Yet again, in the cherimoya fruit, the doctrine of signatures was known as a form of sympathetic magic or homeopathy. Ancient and traditional cultures hold that properties of plants corresponding or homologous to human anatomy hold a magical or scientific benefit to those organs or aspects of the body. We find the cherimoya fruit is, as I've shown, is directly the same structure of the human heart. And here's how the doctrine of law of signatures corresponds. The law of correspondence and doctrine of signature corresponds. The cherimoya fruit has a well-balanced sodium to potassium ratio, and a good potassium level in the body helps control the heart rate variability and helps regulate healthy blood pressure. Yet again, how the cherimoya fruit, both structurally, in form, and in function, directly corresponds and promotes the health and well-being of the human anatomy and the human heart. The fruits are directly correspondent to the anatomy of human being and are optimal for the human being, just as the lung alveoli is directly homologous to the structure, the dendritic fractal structure of the elderberry tree or elderberry bush. It's identical, and elderberry is absolutely beneficial for the circulatory system and antiviral properties and the circulatory system of the lung alveoli. We find again, the torus is the tree of life, is the tree of knowledge. Yet again, the structure, as we've covered in my full Symbols of Power Part 2, Part 3, and the entire film series, on and on and on. We've covered this thoroughly in depth. The structure of the toroidal form is the structure of the tree, is the structure of the universe, of galaxies, is the structure of the human brain itself. The brain is the tree of knowledge, is the central nervous tree, as we've covered all throughout my Symbols of Power series. The tree of knowledge, of good and evil, is the central nervous tree, and the tree of life is the cardiovascular tree, or the phylogenetic tree of life. So these are the two trees referred to in the Garden of Eden. Walter Russell has said that man's body is an extension of the earth. Like all things else, man's body is composed of electric waves of light, the same waves which motivate our radios or illumine our houses. So yet again, the electric dendritic tree-like, dendrite means tree-like, dendritic structure of nature. We find this in the fertility and the fecundity of the tree. Yet again, the fertility of the tree of nature. In ancient Greece was known as the dryad, meaning a wood nymph. It was where we get our word nymphomania, meaning fertility. Nymphomania was when a man was wandering through nature, through the wilderness, and was stricken by the beauty of a young maiden in the wilderness with her wild fertility of nature, a nymph who frolics and is free from the structural confines of the polis, or in other words, of the city. She is a hippie, a wild one, a wild woman sisterhood, in tune with the fertility of the tree of nature. A dryad was one so linked to the spirit of the tree of nature, it was said that if the tree was killed, the spirit of the dryad died along with the tree itself. They were so intrinsically linked. And yet, again, we can actually find the human spirit in the similarity of the trees of nature. Because again, the human being is the child of the tree. We evolved from the tree. Human beings, as well as all vertebrates and all animals, evolved from the eukaryotic life. Prokaryotic life is basically animals. Eukaryotic life are plants. And animals evolved from plants. That's how the evolutionary tree of life occurred. The fecundity and abundity, that's a pun, of nature is abound. The ancient Greeks believed that the hamadryads were the female spirit of the trees, so inextricably linked to its life force that if she died, the tree died along with her. Very beautiful and very touching. My kudos to all those who can relate to the hamadryads today. And yet again, we find the fertility structure of the fertility fruits of the tree of life and the sexuality of nature. And cultures all over the world, indigenous cultures, practiced an ancient sacred rite of marriage to a tree. It was a religious system or cult organized around beliefs that trees contain hidden or sacred power to cure or to enhance fertility, or that they contain the souls of ancestors or of the unborn. So if you focus on a sacred windswept night, you can catch glimpses of them banging. to be as nice as I can about it, which I would prefer to be more vulgar about it. But you can find the banging and the sexual fertility of the trees all throughout nature, which is why they practiced the ancient sacred rite of tree marriage for fertility and fecundity of nature. And this brings us back to the fractal optimization of health and nutrition for optimal genetic human form and human function, human form and function. The perfection of our form is directly expressive of the perfection of its ability to function, which is why if you're a powerful gymnast or an athlete or a dancer or whatever you're doing on a high level with your physical body, that's why your physical body also becomes super attractive and super beautiful, because your body's form represents the function that it performs. They go hand in hand because the energetic form follows the energetic function of the pathways and the flow of energy. So if whatever you're doing with the energy of your body, you're maximizing its potential, its structural genetic potential. Which is why to optimize our human potential, we need to eat the most fractal foods in nature, which are the sacred geometrical plants of nature, which contain the most vital elements of life within them, to promote the optimal human genetics, human genetic expression. Light and information from the sun and from the universe at large comes streaming into the earth and impregnates her with its potent phallic radiation. She gets late and then gives birth to the infinite flora, which are the life cycle of thriving reproductivity. The purpose of fractality is to integrate greater levels of complexity, meaning that infinite amounts of data can be stored within that structure or within that fruit or that being itself. By consuming more fractal foods that are closer to the direct source of electrical transmission or light itself, the structure of space and time itself, the pattern of nature, it contains more electricity and therefore holds and stores more light information codes that signal our genes to both upregulate healing and holistic properties. We begin to physically change our life, both mentally, emotionally, on the heart level, physically on the biological level, by radically switching on our gut microbiome through our diverse gut microbiome, which feeds on the resistant starch and the insoluble, undigestible fiber that all the low carbers claim is unhealthy because we can't digest it. That's what our gut bacteria eats, and that's what our gut bacteria produces: the short chain fatty acids and the medium chain fatty acids like serotonin, dopamine, propionate, and butyrate. These are literally neurotransmitters. These are literally dopamine and serotonin are well known. You guys know these. These are the hormones that regulate our moods and our emotions, of sense of well-being and a sense of pleasure. These neuropeptides are produced by the gut microbiome, and the gut microbiome only feeds on fiber. Our ancestors, our Paleolithic ancestors, were not eating mostly meat that they hunted and foraged and gathered. They were eating mostly, predominantly, over 250 grams of plant fiber every single day. We know that from the fossilized coprolites, which is fossilized poop of our paleo ancestors. They were eating god-awful amounts of plants a day. Ungodly amounts of fiber, over 250 grams of fiber a day. Today, our current recommended daily intake of fiber is 20 grams, and most people get far less than that. And we should be eating over 250 grams of fiber a day, just like our Paleolithic caveman ancestors were. That's the proven science. That's the proven anthropology. All of hominids throughout all of evolution were predominantly plant-based. Almost entirely, actually. So again, this regulates our genetics physically by radically switching on our gut microbiome to our cellular energy production and revamping our entire systemic load, our metabolic load. And this is why we find the sacred geometry structures of Metatron's cube, which is literally the root and seed of the seed of life, known as the fruit of life in sacred geometry, the seed of life in sacred geometry, which gives rise to the flower of life and sacred geometry, which we find in nature. These are the symbolism of the plants of nature, the foods of nature, the foods of intelligence, the structure of consciousness of the universe itself. This is why we find the sacred geometry of the fruits of nature, the fractal holographic patterns and energetic pattern of the pater of matter, of the plants of nature. You are what you eat, which is why if you eat the sacred geometry, you become a sacred geometrical, divinely conscious being. And I know that sounds a lot like, crap that David Wolf would say. It's a divine, intuitive read. But no, seriously, it's the fractal patterns of nature. The more of these plants and phytochemicals and elements that you're eating, not just structurally, geometrically, but you are activating every aspect of your human potential. Which is why we find, again, the fertility fruits of nature. The vulvic, fertile, breast, mammary gland representations of the citrus fruits. The vulvic representations of the fruit. The vulva, the goddess uterus, the goddess mammary glands. The fruits of Mother Nature, her juicy, sweet, delicious, sexual fruits of nature, which activate our divine consciousness, which is our divine wisdom of Sophia. Ancient Greek Sophia means wisdom, which is where we get sophistry, or where we get the sophisticated. Sophisticated. You are wise. You become a wise master. You become a wizard. You become a wise one of the wise dome, of the tree, of the dome of the mushroom, of the dome of nature, the dome of life, the sacred dome of your skull, of your brain, of your head, the capstone of enlightenment. This is why we find the structure of the human harmonics in the human body and how we optimize our human harmonics. This is a graphic that I've combined on the right of our entire human form. Our entire musculoskeletal structure represents the exact harmonic wave of musical notation. And this specific one is the fundamental C harmonic. Is literally the same exact structure. Literally, you can even follow this. Follow this big wave here. This big wave here is identical to the big wave here on the human body. They are exactly homologous. It is exactly identical. And so then we find this big wave here corresponds to this big wave here. It is the human body is the exact fundamental C harmonic. Half or first partial. And I don't know much, I don't know literally anything about musical harmonic theory, but if someone's a musical, theory major, like, boy, you should team up with me and we can take this so much further. This is this harmonic structure, the sacred, the mathematical and musical structure that gives the human being its form. We are literally vibratory beings of musical energy. All of, again, the Hermetic Principles of the quadrivium in nature. And you guys will recognize this slide from my Symbols of Power Part 4 film, where in it I discovered the entire divine proportion of the human brain. Symbols of Power Part 4, where I showed this is literally a phi ratio measurement from both the front of the skull to the back of the skull, harmonic phi ratio from the pituitary gland to the pineal gland, harmonic ratio on every level. I've shown countless examples of how it's a perfect phi golden mean harmonic ratio that creates the structure of the human form and especially the human brain and all of the other human anatomy as well, of the optic nerve. And so this is why we can measure the divine proportion from the top of the skull to the pineal gland, and then from the pineal gland directly to towards the posterior of the skull. And we also get the golden divine proportion measuring from the top of the skull to the olfactory bulb. and then from the olfactory bulb to the pineal gland. And of course, we also get it when measuring from the top of the skull to the pituitary gland, and from the pituitary gland to the base of the skull, to the back of the skull. We also get the divine proportion measuring width-wise when we measure from the lateral edges of the skull into the internal curvature of the sphenoid bone, directly where the optic nerves pass through the foramina. So directly at those points of the inferior cranial fossa, or the cranial floor, are these contours where the lower cerebrum hits, and they are directly corresponding to the divine proportion measurements. When you measure each one, as the divine proportion has an invisible little line that can be extended, vector can be extended here, and so those 2 points correspond directly with the structure of the inferior cranial fossa. And then of course it can also be measured from, yet again, the pituitary, which hangs directly off the infundibulum, which hangs down directly above the hypothalamus region. So the pituitary measures from the pituitary to the pineal, from the pineal to the back of the skull. And so I also realized that the same standing harmonic wave of this of the phi ratio, the golden mean harmonic wave that composes so below the belt in the perineal muscles of the female, is a direct above the belt correspondence of the exact golden ratio standing harmonic wave of the optic relay pathways of the optic nerves, which are literally some of the most active and highly lit up neural pathways when viewed from a diffusion tensor imaging scan. And of course, again, the pituitary and the pineal gland are at the exact golden mean proportion, the divine proportion, which the entire human skull and the entire human brain is entirely composed of nothing but the divine proportion at every single structure. All of these things is the very essence of the esoteric human anatomy, the human physiology, which itself is a microcosmic representation of what the entire universe represents and is doing as a whole. Each one of us is a small fractal representation of what the entire universe itself is actually doing. It's the same physics all the way down, no matter what scale you are focusing on, in universal awareness, whether you're focusing on galactic scale, on the universal scale, or on the microscopic scale. It's the same set of physics, same laws of universal physics that applies at all scales and at all orders of magnitude, all the way down and all the way up, infinitely. It is infinite fractality, and that's what the human body represents. And that's why, I've got my own symbolism. If you guys really like the symbolism artwork, graphic artwork that I've composed, is literally I've discovered and presented why the Freemasonic square and the compass. I've shown this from so many different aspects. I've shown the entire meaning of what the square and compass actually is. Number one, so you get the compass itself, which draws feminine curves. You get the square, or the rule. So it's rather than a compass, it's actually, in Freemasonry, it's called a divider. It's a divide. So it's the symbolism of the divide and rule. In other words, divide and conquer. But it's not just that. It's so much more universal and so much. It's not just, you know, dark or evil or any of that stuff. It's not dark or evil at all. It's just a universal concept. It's like any tool. It can be used however you want to use it for whatever purpose. But it literally comes from the physics of nature, human anatomy, esoteric anatomy, and the physiology itself. As the square or the compass is actually depicted at a very esoteric angle of 47 degrees. 47 degrees is an extremely esoteric number. You'll find it everywhere. But so it's 47 plus the 90-degree square, or the 90-degree rule, which equates to the sacred number of 137, which is the golden number, the golden angle of phyllotaxis, which is the Fibonacci spiral, the angle at which plants spiral and they grow stalks at a 137-degree angle from each other, which is literally known as the golden angle. And it's the angle of phyllotaxis that all plants grow in, because it's the divine number of complete division, to where each of these branches will equally attain the maximum amount of sunlight, so they can each attain the maximum amount of growth and expansion without interfering with each other. So this number 137, and so that's combined what the actual meaning of the square and compass, just one of the layers of the square and compass, what it actually means. We covered so much more in depth in Symbols of Power Part 2 and Part 3. So there's so much more in-depth meaning of the square and compass, which is literally the urogenital and the anal triangle combined. So in other words, it's literally the human sexual anatomy. It's literally the pelvis. It's literally the perineal region of the human body, which is the sacral region. It is the sacred sacrum. It is the origin of sexual creation. So again, it is the divine masculine and the divine feminine combining. How am I doing this here? Combining. So I can't. How does it go? Like this. Combining together and merging together in the sexual perineal union, which creates the universal sexagram. And I've got whole other original pieces that I haven't published anywhere yet that will also be in the book. Complete original discoveries. This is where the two pelvises, where the two, where both of you, where, your two pelvis regions are joined together. And so therefore each of your urogenital triangles come together, and they, depending on what angle or what position you're having, and it literally creates a sexagram, or also known as a hexagram, but I call it the sexagram because hex is literally sex. Hex is Latin, is Greek for sex is Latin for, which is Greek hex, which means six, which is why sex literally means six. Six, sex, hex. The sex is the hex, which is the square, which is the cube of creation, the cube of space. And so, I mean, we could go on and on and on with all this stuff, but so that's what, another aspect of what the square and the compass represents. But in this artwork that I've depicted, if you guys like this artwork, it's available. You can check it out in the Lifting the Veil merch store. It's a really cool graphic that I put together, but it's literally the human body sitting in full lotus position. That's what the square and the compass is. It's with the sacred G, which is literally the G. My name is Cullen Smith. This is Lifting the Veil. You can find all of my full books, presentations, videos, films, articles, posts at subscribestar.com/liftingtheveil. Patreon has suspended this work and my account and income stream for this content. So if you are a supporting patron, then please, I ask you to move your support over to subscribestar.com/liftingtheveil. And I have just established a completely free, uncensored, totally free speech social media platform that replaces Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, every other platform all in one on liftingtheveil.locals.com. You can download the Locals app and you can join our group and have totally free speech and totally uncensored, unrestricted content access. And there is also a ton of exclusive content, and I will leave the cited reference links in the description down below. So you can check that out for all of my full content, and I will see you guys in the next video. I rely solely on word of mouth and the recommended algorithms are not recommending any of my videos or films anymore. My channel has literally been completely restricted, so I rely on your help by sharing my work around if you appreciate it, and leave me your comments. I definitely want to know what you have to share and what you have to think about all of this stuff, and I will see you in the next video.